Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show, and welcome back to my good buddy Keith Smith. He's been out in the middle of the ocean, but he's back, safely returning from his cruise. Welcome back, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, we had a blast. It was a great time. Good disconnect time. We talk about a little bit at the end of the show if there's a few moments, but yeah, but we had an absolute blast. It was much needed and well taken advantage of. I guess we had a great time.
That's right. So we are going to schedule some nonsense for the end of the show to talk a little bit about Keith's journey. We'll talk about his inability to disconnect and all of that. We'll discuss all of that stuff coming up. Before we get into all of our topics, though, happy belated birthday. Happy
Thanks,
belated
man.
birthday, man. That also, you went on a cruise, you had your birthday. I feel like so much has happened since I last talked to you.
Yeah. I'm a year older. I hope I don't look it. So I'll, hopefully I still looking good and young and healthy and all that. But yeah, we had a blast. It was a great time. And then yesterday, July 31st was my birthday. Had a pretty low key day with the family. Ran Bella around with some soccer stuff, and then just hung out in the evening and had some pizza. And it's how it gets as you get older. It's as long as you get kind of the meal you want, you feel pretty good about your birthday.
Exactly. You don't want to go do anything too crazy. You just
Nope.
want to have some good food, hang out with the family, and call it that. Call it at that. But yeah, you look rested, which is what you should after coming off of your cruise and everything and ready to go. And I think on one hand, we were fortunate that we didn't have a lot happen around the NBA while you were gone. There's a lot to talk about today, but it wasn't like every day we're just getting bombarded by huge news or anything like that. Damian Lillard didn't get traded. We'll talk more about him in just a bit. James Harden didn't get traded, but Jaylen Brown did get a new contract. Now, Ron Gutterman and I already talked extensively about this, but we didn't get your take. And of course, coming from the Celtics side of things, you're going to have a little bit extra to think about there. So, what did you think about Jaylen Brown getting the Supermax deal from Boston?
Yeah, no surprise that he got the contract. If anything, the surprise was that it took like 3 weeks longer to land than we thought it might. I was pretty convinced he was going to get a supermax extension here from Boston, and he did, and that part is again no real shocker there. It was wondering what was taking so long. Why did it take 3 weeks? What was being negotiated? There's no options in the deal. The trade bonus is in there. It had been erroneously reported, unfortunately, by too many outlets, in my opinion, that he was trying to negotiate a no trade clause. He was not eligible for one. That was never going to be a thing. That he was trying to negotiate multiple option years. That was, again, never going to be a thing. That's not allowed. So I'm not sure where all that came from. But, at this point, it was, for Jaylen Brown, the money seemed to be fairly well locked in. It was just, was there going to be an option or not? And what was the trade bonus going to be? The trade bonus ended up being the lesser of 7% or $7 million for him. That'll come into play in the latter years of the extension, as those years will be the below max years for Jaylen Brown, as that'll come in under the 35% just because the cap growth will outpace the contract growth. But all around, kind of, it is what it is, right? It's the big thing for me. So I learned about this kind of old school, saw it on Sports Center in the morning.
The lower ticker.
Yep, that's it. It's funny. I turned it on just as they started talking about it. I guess Woj or Mark Spears, maybe whoever was tweeted about it, and they were just starting to get into it. And it was interesting because I instantly was like, that seems high, the $304 million that they reported it as. And then, so because I'm me, I pulled my laptop out because it was with me because I don't go anywhere without it. So I pulled it out. I did a little bit of math and I said, they're doing that based on if the cap goes up to max 10%. Cap is only projected to go up a little over about 4.4%. So Brown's, the real number that should be right now projected is about 288 million, 49.7 million in first year salary. So, at some point it all becomes like monopoly money anyway, but I wrote about everything at Spot Track. I won't I know you and Ron already talked about it. People can go read my in-depth thoughts on all this stuff and reporting on it, but those are just the things that jumped out to me with Brown's new extension.
All right. Yeah, I like it. I think that it's a lot of money, but I like the nuance there that you brought in about, well, it's only really that much if the cap goes up, because I hadn't heard about that yet either. So
yeah, so that was just I mean, that's the games they play, right? The initial reports are always going to be most favorable to the player and the agent, because that's generally where these things come out of, and then you kind of get into it and figure it out as you go. Maybe the cap does go up 10%. And that's the number that it hits, and if it does, great. Good for Jaylen Brown, good for everybody else. And the one last thing I'll say is, this is a perfect example for something you and I have been hammering home here for the last, I don't know, 6 months or so. You got to think of these things in terms of percentage of the cap. This is 35% of the cap is what he's getting. No different than what Russell Westbrook got when he got his 35% of the cap deal back with the Thunder, when he signed that as one of the original designated player contracts. And that worked out to be, a little over 35 million, because the cap was only a little over 100 million. Yes, today, does Jaylen Brown have the richest contract in the NBA? He absolutely does. He won't be, it could be by the end of the week, Anthony Davis could knock him off if he gets a full 5-year max extension from the Lakers. So, we're just in a position where these things it's all about timing, right? He hit the eligibility at a timing when the cap was at its highest it's ever been, and it'll be knocked off within a year at the very latest by another deal. That whoever signs that deal, or whomever, I guess if it's multiple folks sign it, those will get knocked off by the next one, whether that's Giannis and Jason Tatum or whoever. These deals are all going to get, knocked off as it goes along. That's just the nature of things. And that's just the way it kind of goes. So I thought some of the overreaction, because of course I wasn't on Twitter or any of that, wasn't online. I was really stuck watching the talking head shows. And as I was watching them, there's so much, should Jaylen Brown be the highest paid player in NBA history? Blah, 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 without a reference to, it's just the way this works. It's just a matter of he was, eligible at the exact right time to get it.
Yeah, and whoever comes along next will get more. And Anthony Davis, I think he can do a 3-year extension, but make it a total of a 5-year deal. That may push him up over that, but we'll see.
Well,
especially if that 10%
option. Davis he could opt out of that player option and add 4 years on that way if he does it now, or he could wait. It's all subjective, right? These guys will all get there, and
they will be very wealthy.
Get more. It reminded me of, and I didn't allude to the full joke when I wrote the piece for Spot Track, but the movie Dude, Where's My Car?
Yeah,
when they're ordering Chinese food, and the lady just keeps saying, and then,
yeah,
and I put that in there. I'm like, no, and then, right? Because there's always going to be somebody else that comes along. There's always a bigger fish.
All right, let's get into
My Car and Star Wars. I just worked two things in.
I like it. I like all the references.
Baby, I'm ready to go.
Let's put them all together. The NBA sent a nice little warning to Damian Lillard and to his agent. A lot of people were saying, well, wait a minute. But what about, don't you love but what abouts? But what about James Harden saying he only wants to go to the Clippers? Why is that different than Damian Lillard saying he only wants to go to the Miami Heat? Why should that get a warning from the NBA? I think the difference is, from the NBA's perspective, the possible threat. Of course, they're denying everything, but the possible threat that Damian Lillard might not actually fulfill his contract, meaning he won't play if he isn't traded to the team that he wants to go to, the Miami Heat, that is the issue that the NBA could really have here, and that's why this could have come out. Nonetheless, though, here's the NBA warning saying, hey, you can't do this. You can't say you just want to go to one team. You can't threaten to withhold your services here. We thought this was going to get addressed in the CBA. We thought the CBA was going to have something in it about players demanding trades. And we know publicly Damian Lillard hasn't demanded a trade, although we know behind the scenes they've made that clear. We know if they publicly demand a trade, the NBA can find them, but we know that's not how this game is played. So is this just the way of the future here, where if these demands start getting kind of messy with players, rather than put it into the CBA, the NBA will try to step in and dissuade this kind of stuff from happening?
Yeah, I think that's where we're headed with this. I think you're going to see the league come in more. I think the problem with this one versus the Harden one or versus any number of other circumstances. I know people brought up Anthony Davis back in the day of,
Mhm.
we'll only go there. That was all back channel stuff. The Harden thing has only been back channel. Lillard's agent was quoted on the record saying, "Hey, if you trade for him, you're getting a guy who might be unhappy." And I'm
Right.
paraphrasing the quote a little bit, but that's the problem, right? He went on record saying this. Now he's trying to do right by his client and trying to get him where his client wants to be, but that's the problem. It's the same as kind of like the tampering stuff,
Yeah.
where everybody tampers, and as long as you're not egregious, like a 3-team sign and trade involved, multiple weird thing deals being announced days in advance or being reported days in advance, no one's really going to jump all over everyone's case with this. When it becomes a situation of, well, wait a minute, you're openly now flouting the rules and you're kind of throwing it in our faces, that's where the league's going to come down. And that's I think why the league here has said, hey, whoa, wait a minute, like, hey, all 30
Mhm.
teams, like, you're fair game to get this, and all agents and everybody, knock it off with this stuff. We can't be doing this anymore. Like, you got to stop. So we'll see. Does it change anything? Probably not. I don't think so. I also think the idea that Damian Lillard with 4 years left under contract, if he gets traded to another team, is all of a sudden going to be like, nope, not coming in, or going to act like an idiot. That seems a little crazy to me. So I think this is more just everybody's kind of playing the game, but they're playing it a little too publicly for the NBA's liking.
Yeah, that's going to be the issue for the league, and that's why this is going to become a thing. And again, I think there was some momentum to put something official in the CBA, but I think this is going to be how they'll handle it moving forward. Is they'll just do this. But
Yep.
um, okay, let's talk a little bit about the Heat's offer. Now, this is according to Shams Charania. The Heat have been preparing a trade package around 3 to 4 first-round draft picks, potential swaps, as well as second-round picks, a young player potentially, and it could be. I saw elsewhere that it could be Tyler Hero as well going to a third team in
Yep.
this type of situation. Now we've been hearing that Miami is trying to fleece the Blazers, kind of flaunting the fact that Damian Lillard only wants to play for Miami, and it's just saying, hey, you will take Tyler Hero and nothing else, and you will like it, and that's obviously that doesn't even work math wise, but
Yeah.
trying to really get one over on the Blazers because of the situation. I felt that was getting kind of ugly. But to me, from the outside perspective, if I hear 3 to 4 first round picks, swaps are involved. Now, not all first round picks are created equal, and that's something that we should stress. But on the surface, without knowing the exact value of these firsts, are these top 20 protected firsts, or are they like real first round picks? That still sounds about right. I mean, that sounds about in the ballpark for a Damian Lillard trade. So, yeah, this to me, that makes me more optimistic that at some point something's going to get done, because I don't know that the Blazers could ask for a lot more unless, again, a bunch of these picks are like not real first round picks.
Yeah, my guess is they would all be real first, because
Mhm.
one thing is, in order for Miami to offer that many, they have to push those into further out years to be able to do that, because they do owe one more protected pick. It goes to OKC. That's via the Clippers from the Paul George trade, where that kind of all got thrown in there together in that mix. But what's going to happen is that pick, what the Heat could do is they could basically write the language around. If we convey the pick in X year, then the next year it'll work, towards our favor to go this way. So I think what's ultimately going to happen here with this for Miami is they can get to the 3 picks themselves. They could probably offer a swap in there. And then they're probably looking at, hey, if we trade Tyler Hero, we should be able to get another first round pick. And I think that's probably fair. I think people have gone a little too far with Tyler Hero's got no value and he's not even worth a first round pick. I think that's a little crazy. To me, Tyler Hero is a good player. He's an efficient scorer. He can play on and off the ball. He's been a good player for a number of years now.
Mhm.
So I think people have just gone too far with saying he's not good and not valuable. Yeah, he can't be the centerpiece for a Lillard trade himself, obviously. And then young players, I don't know what that means. maybe you get a young player in the hero trade
Right.
and you route it. So, but we're basically in the same spot we've been in, right? Miami can only go so far themselves. And then if you're Portland, you're basically saying, all right, go get some other stuff somewhere else. And then we can regroup on this. So I continue as I did before vacation and even a month ago when we were in Las Vegas. I continue to believe Damian Lillard will end up on the Miami Heat. It's just on the Heat to get the pieces necessary to make that happen.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And at some point it's going to happen at all. And what we've also heard, and this is from the Lakers side of things, because not that they're involved in the Damian Lillard situation, but everybody's been wondering, when are the Lakers going to sign a 14th player? They're not the only team in the NBA that's waiting to do stuff. We've now hit a point where the league's business is kind of at a standstill while we're waiting for something to happen with Dame, something to happen with James Harden. If something's going to happen there, maybe Pascal Siakam. A lot of players, teams are waiting for the dust to settle from whenever this goes down. So I would expect whenever this happens, there's going to be some other moves that go down so in the days following, because a lot around the NBA is being held up by this situation.
Exactly. Yeah. We've got Christian Wood, Kelly Oubre, PJ Washington. As you said, nothing earth shattering happened while I was gone. So it's all the same names that are still available in free agency. But those guys are, they're all kind of out there just kind of waiting. And at this point, for all of them, it's probably either going to be a minimum deal or a chunk of an exception.
Mm-hmm.
So for those guys, if the money is going to be roughly the same, what you're waiting to see is, does one of these teams have 3 or 4 roster spots? And more importantly, 1 or 2 rotation spots to fill,
Yes.
where they can jump in, kind of be in the rotation and be a part of things. So that's what we're sitting on waiting on now with those guys. And like you said, yeah, a handful of teams are looking at it, because like if you're the Clippers, if you have to do like a 3-for-1 type of trade for James Harden, then you're in a spot where maybe now you have a rotation spot on a good team where somebody can come in and play right away, and you can just kind of keep things moving that way. So that's where we're headed with that.
All right. Garrett Temple signs with the Raptors on a veteran minimum deal, but that's not really the big story. Like Garrett Temple, he's fine, right? But not really the big story. The Raptors now have one more player than they will ultimately be allowed to have. So roster crunch here coming for Toronto. What are they going to do? Does this mean that they have their eyes on maybe like a 2-for-1 trade or something that could still go down this summer?
Yeah, and we could see, unbalanced trades are one way to get there. Straight waivers is another way, or just trading a guy away into somebody else's, generally at this time of year, we would say cap space. That's not really existent around the league anymore. There's a very, very little cap space left. So what we would be looking at this case is a trade or just a straight waiver, or a trade into an exception, right? Where we see, something like that. So Toronto, not the only team in this boat. There are 7 teams that are sitting on what I like to call plus roster spots, meaning they've got more guys on standard contracts than you can have. In the offseason, teams can carry up to 21 players on roster. But by the time we get to the regular season, that has to get cut down to 18. And that is 15 players on standard contracts, 3 players on two-way contracts. So that's how you get to your 18. So Toronto right now, and I'm not talking 2-ways in here. This is just guys on standard deals. Toronto is +1. Atlanta is +1. Washington is +1. The Clippers are +1. The Grizzlies are +2. The Spurs are +3. And the Oklahoma City Thunder are +5. So they have 20 players on standard contracts. None of those teams either have what I like to call easy cuts to make. When it's an easy cut, you look at it and say, all right, well, that's a guy on an expiring deal who's either not going to play or we have no intention of having on the team, or somebody who's on a non-guaranteed contract where we just waive and move along from that. There's a couple of those in there, mixed in there, but none of them are just, we make one move very easily. We're right into roster compliance. All those teams are going to have to cut or waive, trade, get rid of a player that they'd rather not probably get rid of to get into compliance. That also means that is what? That's 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 14 players. Plus we mentioned guys like Christian Wood, Kelly Oubre Jr., PJ Washington. We still probably have about 20 to 25 viable NBA players that are going to be free agents at some point, because that's, where we're going to land to, right? There's still going to be a bunch of guys sitting around when it's time for roster cutdowns and that don't have jobs. And there's not that many open roster spots around the league. I'll work on that. I'm working on something now where I can put out a tweet or so that says what everybody has open for roster spots, but there's really not that many around the league. So that's, and that kind of happens every year, right? We had 58 this year, I guess, through the draft, but 60-ish new players into the league every year. Yes, we have the third two-way spot, so that's only 30 new spots, and those didn't all go to all those players that came in via the draft or undrafted guys or whatever. So it gets tough this time of year. You end up seeing some guys who are probably still viable players, losing roster spots just because roster numbers are a thing.
And this is exactly why, in addition to the Damian Lillard thing, why teams that have an open roster spot, if not two open roster spots right now, don't seem like they're in that big of a hurry, because they're waiting to see what happens. What are some of these teams going to do that are plus roster spots? Who is going to pop free that maybe they weren't expecting to in the coming weeks? So that's part of why teams are not, fans are on edge. When are you going to fill this roster spot? Sure. But teams are saying, let's take our time, and you never know who may suddenly pop up on the market, and then, hey, guess what? We've got an open roster spot, so come on down.
Yeah, and I mean, so for example, you mentioned the Lakers, obviously, right? They're sitting on one, but the Celtics are sitting on a roster spot. Lakers are actually sitting on two. The Warriors have a couple open roster spots that they can fill. The Suns are full up with standard spots, but they still have a two-way spot. The Heat are sitting on two standard roster spots, and obviously we don't know how the Damian Lillard thing is going to resolve. So those are some of the contenders that are just sitting on these roster spots that we'll be able to bring somebody in eventually.
Exactly. It's coming. It'll happen eventually. Patience.
Patience. Exactly.
Patience, Daniel song.
And the older the player, sometimes they're a little more content to sign after that first week training camp is over. When it's not quite the NFL,
not like the NFL, right?
Camp, but it is getting more popular. So a guy like Tristan Thompson, I'm sure if he's going to catch on somewhere, wouldn't mind coming in a little bit later in the process, because the reality is he's not going to go through a full training camp and preseason and all that other stuff.
All right, let's talk extensions. Kawhi, the Clippers, not in a rush to try to get an extension done here. I believe it's beginning of September when he's eligible for an extension.
He's actually eligible now, and Paul George is the beginning of September.
That's what I flipped it to. Yeah, that's what it was. Okay, so but they're not in any hurry to get this done just yet. And I think this is going to be, in addition to Paul George, this is going to be one of the more fascinating situations around the league that maybe we're not talking about enough, because I don't think the Clippers want, nor should they want, to say, take all the money, all the years, here you guys go, with how frequently Paul George and Kawhi Leonard have missed games. On the same token, though, what a Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, are they receptive to that? Or do they say, no, we are stars, give us all the money, give us all the years now? How much of an impasse is there, if any at all, in that situation? That could certainly be something to keep an eye on, particularly with the rumors that were, I guess, about a month ago now, that the Clippers were, at least listening on the idea of trading Paul George. I think that's in preparation for what if this does go south. Not that that's what they expect, not that that's what I'm expecting to happen, but it's a possibility.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Both of them too. Let's remember, when they both got to the Clippers, they kind of aligned everything so that their contracts would be mirror images of each other, that they would expire at the same time. They both have player options for next season. So they're both in a spot where, once George is eligible, obviously, they could both sign 5-year extensions and add on, or I guess 4-year extensions and add on the extra year there if they decline those player options for next season in advance. So they would be able to do that and get to those numbers. So I think it would be a spot where all of a sudden you would see them do that in a normal circumstance. But with the amount of time, as you mentioned, that these guys have missed, and the enormous financial commitment that would be, I don't know that the Clippers are ready to say, hey, here's 4 or 5 year more attachment to you guys at 50, 60, 70 million dollars moving forward. I think they're probably a little bit more like, you want to do a 2+1? Maybe we can make something like that work. It's also, this is Kawhi, right? He's never been in a rush to do any of this stuff. He's always just kind of taking things at his own pace. We remember that free agency had dragged into the earthquake night in summer league, and that's when everything kind of went crazy with that. So we'll see how it all comes together. My guess is something probably gets done eventually, because I don't think they want to take this into, hey, let's take it into free agency next year, because then that could just get kind of messy. But both of those guys were very clear they wanted to play in LA, they wanted to be there. The other LA team's not really in a position to be a suitor for them, via signing them anymore. So if you want to play in LA, it's going to be with the Clippers. And, if I was them too, I would look at him like this. They've been pretty good to us. They've kind of let us do our thing. Like, we don't really need to, go, running off anywhere else. But this chance for the Clippers to snatch back a little organizational control, I guess.
Right. And we'll see if that ultimately happens. Last thing we've got before our scheduled nonsense. Josh Hart still working on an extension with the Knicks. When you mentioned this before the show, I was like, isn't that done already? Like, I thought this had already been taken care of, but we know that Josh Hart, surprisingly, he opted out of his contract. He had that kind of, what's that?
Opted in.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Opted into it, which was a surprise. We assumed he was going to opt out of his deal. That was that mutual option that Hart had.
Yeah, kind of the Major League Baseball style. Yeah.
Yeah, it was an interesting contract there, but nonetheless, he opted in, which was a surprise. But with the idea of they would get an extension done, that's still not done. But it's assumed that it will indeed happen, and Josh Hart is going to get a significant amount of money coming his way.
Yeah, and that's the reporting that's out there. I believe this was from Stephen Bondi of the it's either New York Daily News or the New York Post. I apologize. I can't remember which one he works for, but one of the New York papers covering the Knicks and Nets and the NBA as a whole. He reported 4 years, $75 million. And that sounds about right. We had heard something in the 18 to 20 million range per season for Josh Hart. And, that's where that had kind of, come together. And that's about what this number, falls in that range at 75 million. So I think that's probably where this will ultimately fall and land out. And, again, like most things, it'll probably get done. But a lot of these guys, they're off now, right? They're off, on vacations, they're doing other stuff. Not to say negotiations can't happen. Most people listening to this of a certain age, I know you and I have both signed e-docs documents before, where it's, comes, you don't need to be in a room with a pen and a piece of paper. That's often for the, photography moment there, right? For the whole social media of it all. But yeah, well, we'll see. But this, tells me if they're reporting, hey, this is still going to get done, it's probably going to get done. The Knicks, they've got other work to do too. They still need to find a power forward, a backup one for Julius Randle. They don't really have anybody on the roster that can play that spot right now. And yeah, Randall's, I get it, right? Part of the reason why they traded Obi Toppin was he needed a bigger role, but you still need somebody to play 10 to 12 minutes a night behind Randall. You still need somebody that can cover if Randall misses games within reason. Still got to maybe find an Evan Fournier trade. Maybe that's how they fill the power forward spot. We'll see if that's how that comes together. And then Emmanuel Quickley's still extension eligible as well. So a lot of stuff still going on for the Knicks here, even though we're into the NBA August of it all, the dead period here.
Yes, it is. It is indeed. It is indeed. But you know what? Before we know it, everything's going to ramp up again, and we're going to be going crazy. But now we've got some time for some scheduled nonsense. All right. First of all, before I give you any grief about your inability to disconnect, do you want to show off your medal?
Yeah, look at this
that you're wearing.
That's my cruise line medal right there. We did
podcast listeners, you're missing out. That is something special.
That's it. Yeah, I'll hold it up one more time so everybody can see. So full disclosure, shortly before we were set to go on our trip, my wife broke her ankle. So a lot of the things you associate with a cruise, which is, playing in the pools and doing the water slides. And we were on a Disney cruise and going to Disney's private island and the beach and all that stuff. That couldn't happen. She's thankfully everything's going to be okay, and she's healing well already, but she's in a boot, and it's not a boot she can walk on. It's a non-weight bearing and all that stuff, and she's on a one of those knee scooters, one of those fancy deals. So we didn't have the normal kind of spend a lot of time in the water type cruise stuff. So we did a lot of trivia. They do a ton of trivias on the ship. A lot of them are Disney based, of course, but they also did sports trivia. They did general knowledge trivia. And let me tell you, this is just one of many medals that the Smith family cleaned up on in the trivia. We did quite well. My wife and daughter did really well with the Disney trivia parts of it. I did, presumably, as I'm sure most would guess, well with the sports trivia, and I did.
Did they do NBA trivia?
There was a couple NBA questions mixed in. There was no specific NBA. All right, I'll be completely honest. I dominated the sports trivia. I don't think most of the people are a level of sports fan that I am that were on the ship, and I think they were just kind of there to hang out in the sports bar where they did it and have beers and eat wings. So it was fine, but we had a blast, man. It was great. The food, phenomenal on the ship. Absolutely, great meals every single night. Of interest to you, my friend, we absolutely, my daughter and I dominated Marvel trivia twice.
Nice.
2 different Marvel trivias, 20 of 20 on both of them. Got every question right, and we crushed it. And on the new Disney ship, the Disney Wish, that's the ship we were on. It's about a year or so old. They have a Marvel themed restaurant.
Oh, very cool.
Where the whole dinner is all Marvel themed, and it's all the Avengers are displaying tech, new types of tech, and it's all Scott Lang and Hope Van Dyne, Ant-Man and the Wasp that are doing it. And as you can imagine, there's some hijinks that ensue throughout the course of your meal, and there's a whole show component and
very cool
interactive components and stuff. So super cool. We had an absolute blast. We had a great time. It was a lot of fun, despite being a different kind of cruise than what we're used to. So yeah, it was great.
Very cool. Very cool. That sounds like an awesome trip, and glad to hear you were able to dominate at trivia.
Yes,
especially NBA. It's almost not fair. Like summer league champs. It's not fair when you're going when you're.
Yeah, these are questions like this gentleman became the NBA's all-time leading scorer last season, and it's like, oh, okay, if that's what we're gonna do, that's even easier. So,
you're like, I do this for a living.
But then they mix in weird things like this cycling champ from 1975, and it's like, I have no idea. So I didn't quite dominate that as well. But my daughter, though, super impressive with the Marvel trivia, like things that I thought I knew, like she was all over, which was really cool. Like what shirt does Bruce Banner put on when he's leaving in Thor Ragnarok, when they're leaving in the Quinjet? He wears one of Tony Stark's t-shirts. Do you know which band it is?
Oh, that's a good question.
She was all over it. Duran.
I was gonna be my guess. Was Duran.
Yep. So she was all over that. So yeah, I was a proud dad with her knowledge of all things Marvel.
Nice. So that's awesome. And then I'm getting texts from you during the cruise about the NBA, and you had me break NBA. You're in the middle of the ocean, and you couldn't access Twitter. So you're texting me to have me tweet stuff out for you.
So let me explain. We did have there's Wi-Fi on the ship that you connect in to be able to use the ship's app on your phone.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were on Wi-Fi, we could still get iMessages. So I'm sitting there one night, we're hanging out, and I get this iMessage that, hey, this guy's signing with the Detroit Pistons. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I'm like, well, I can't really get this out. If anyone wants to know a little inside, if you don't help with these things, you're probably not going to get the next one, right? Yeah. They're whether it be team, agent, player, whoever it is, they're not going to come to you with the next story. So what ends up happening is I was like, well, I can get this out through my buddy Trevor, because I'd been iMessaging you a handful of times to make sure I wasn't missing anything. Mm-hmm. And that's how we got the story out there. We did get the internet one day, but for very good reason. We could not see the Women's World Cup game. It was not showing on the ship. So I paid for the internet, streamed the worst stream I've seen probably since my college days when streaming was like a new thing and it was all grainy and crappy. And the only feed we could get to stay up and stay consistent was Telemundo's feed. And nobody in my family speaks Spanish. So we were listening to a Spanish broadcast with a grainy, crappy picture, but we did get to watch the U.S. women tie the Netherlands. And no spoilers if anybody was waiting to watch it later. They tied Portugal today and made it through by the skin of their teeth into the
that shot off the post.
So yeah, exactly. And we were up this morning while watching that at 3 this morning. We all woke up and watched, and then we were good. Our plan was watch, go back to bed for a couple hours, but we're all too fired up and like, what happened?
Too excited.
Where's our team? So, but yeah. So that's the truth. That's the story from the cruise.
All right. Well, I think that was some good scheduled nonsense. We'll have some more coming up later this week. As you guys know, the NBA news cycle, it is screeching to a halt currently. We will still have plenty of shows out and plenty of things to discuss. And I know Sean Davis is going to do some stuff breaking down some, power rankings type things and things like that. So plenty still to find here on the NBA Front Office Show. Just know we may not be every single day during the month of August. But again, that's going to pick up as soon as we get into, say, mid-September or so, and the season starts up again. Can't wait for it. But Keith, so happy to have you back. It's a lot of fun, of course, talking with Ron. Ron did a fantastic job filling in, but always enjoy talking NBA basketball with you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Make sure you do subscribe right here to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. Don't forget to turn on those notifications and follow us over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is you listen to podcasts. Till next time, everybody. See ya and stay safe.